What if I told you that you could build bigger legs with workouts that take less than 10 minutes, and they're actually easy to get through? Sounds like clickbait, right? But the data we'll cover today and a few simple exercise choices make it entirely possible. You don't need brutal high volume sessions to build a decent set of legs. In this video, I'll show you a minimalist, research-backed leg day that's stupidly simple, pretty easy, time efficient, and still builds muscle. Warming up is honestly pretty overrated for muscle growth training. For one, the forces involved in lifting, especially with more moderate rep ranges, are actually pretty low compared to sports. Couple that with the fact that injury rates are notoriously low for bodybuilding, and warming up may not be strictly necessary. Indeed, the first few reps of a high rep set might be enough to warm you up. A study by our own lab found no benefit of warming up versus not warming up on performance in a typical muscle growth workout. And in general, the research shows that the only effective warm-up seems to come from a heavy set of 1 to 3 reps at 70 to 90% of your 1 rep max. This heavy post-activation performance enhancement set boosts performance on set 1 and 2 by around a rep or 2 usually. So there is a potential small benefit of warming up. But equally, in the context of a muscle growth workout, who really cares about an extra rep or 2 on the first or second set? Oftentimes, across the whole workout, it doesn't really make a meaningful difference. So if you want a quick, easy leg day, you may as well just skip the warm-up. I've personally been skipping warm-ups on all of my workouts for months now, and haven't really noticed the difference. Let's get to the actual workout. For our first movement, we'll do pistol squats for 2 sets of as many reps as possible. I recommend doing lengthened supersets, meaning when you can't get another full range of motion rep, go past failure doing partials. The pistol squat is a great movement for your quads, adductors, and glutes. Additionally, because you're training with a single leg, your body weight is often enough for many people to get close to failure without the need for any additional load. So you can do these without taking the time to load up a barbell or even set up a rack. However, let's say you're not strong enough to get at least 5 reps of pistol squats and get into the hypertrophy rep range. What do I recommend you do instead? I would recommend dumbbell super range of motion lengthened partial lunges. You get a tiny bit of extra assistance from your rear leg, but they still offer an insane stretch on your quads, glutes, and adductors, and are a bit easier than pistol squats. But let's say you can do a ton of reps on pistol squats before you reach failure. In that case, I would recommend adding some weight to the movement, so that you get less than around 10 reps per side per set. The easiest way to do this is simply to put a dumbbell on your shoulder. Aiming for under 10 to 12 reps per set means a bit less effort. You don't get quite as out of breath or experience nearly as much burn. Additionally, some research conducted by our own lab suggests that lifters are more accurate at gauging how close to failure they are below around 12 reps. I recommend holding on to something on both sides when performing pistol squats. This will make the movement a lot more stable and easier to push to failure. I would recommend not resting between legs and then taking 90 to 120 seconds between sets. I know the pistol squat gets a lot of hate, but I personally think it's a super underrated movement, especially in the context of low effort leg training. There's no spinal loading, so it's great for people who have lower back issues. Because there's no spinal loading, you don't typically need to brace as much and you can breathe in and out more freely, which can help a lot with the feeling of being out of breath during leg training. Because you can breathe freely, you can also more easily switch from one leg to the next without needing to catch your breath, and it's challenging enough for most lifters to not really need much additional load. As a result, the pistol squat just becomes a pretty easy, pretty time efficient way of training your quads, glutes, and adductors in a deep stretch. Now that we've covered the quads, glutes, and adductors, for our hamstrings, we'll do 2 sets of seated leg curls for 8 to 12 reps, with 90 seconds of rest between sets. Here are a few tips for execution. First, lean forward. Increasing hip flexion will pre-stretch the hamstrings even more, specifically the long head of the biceps femoris, the semitendinosus, and the semimembranosus. Second, lock the thigh pad as low as possible. This will make you feel more locked in and reduce any potential cheating. Third, I recommend going past failure on these as well. When you can't get another full rep, simply do partials past failure until you can't move anymore. Fourth, try pointing your toes up for extra gastrocnemius stretch. The gastrocnemius is one of the 2 calf muscles in your body. Unlike the soleus, it is both an ankle plantar flexor and a knee flexor, meaning pointing your toes up stretches it more and it still is involved in the leg curl. Pointing your toes up, therefore, probably gives it more stimulus with no real downside. So why the seated leg curl and not the lying leg curl? Well, we actually have a study comparing the 2 movements. And because the seated leg curl pre-stretches the hamstrings, this study actually found more growth in the hamstrings from the seated leg curl compared to the lying leg curl. So don't get me wrong, the lying leg curl also works, but it seems to emphasize other muscles that aren't quite as important, like the sartorius a bit more. So the lying leg curl might work best if you're also doing a second hip hinge exercise, which we'll talk about later in this video. As our third and optional movement for this leg day, we'll include some seated leg press calf raises. Why is it optional? Well, whether you train calves is really up to you. But if you do, I would recommend doing 2 sets of 5 to 8 reps with around 60 seconds of rest between sets. You can go higher in reps if your personal comfort is better in that rep range. The leg press calf raise is great on a few counts. First, if you have a stack loaded machine, it's extremely time efficient. Just select the weight and get going. That also makes it low effort. You don't need to load up any plates. Secondly, your back is supported. So compared to standing calf raise machines, which load your back, it's a bit less fatiguing. And third, having your knees extended means extra gastrocnemius stretch. And indeed, 2 studies have found better gastrocnemius growth with straight leg calf raises compared to bent leg calf raises. And this likely has to do with gastrocnemius stretch, since when your knees are bent, like in a seated calf raise, the gastrocnemius is shortened. So not only is it time efficient, low fatigue, it's also effective for calf growth. I would personally recommend doing lengthened partials on calf raises. We have 3 studies on lengthened partials for the calves. First, a study by Castellano and colleagues found double calf growth when doing lengthened partials on the calf raise compared to full range of motion. One of our studies compared doing past failure partials for the calves, so doing full range of motion reps followed by partials when you hit failure in the stretch, to just doing a full range of motion, and found around 40% more growth in the calves with those past failure partials. Another study we conducted compared that approach, full range of motion reps followed by past failure partials, to doing just past failure partials, and yet again, just doing those past failure partials in the stretch was beneficial for growth. So I heavily recommend doing lengthened partials for your calf training. If you don't want to do a leg press calf raise, a dedicated seated calf raise machine with your knees extended is best. But even a standing variation or a single leg calf raise standing is fine too. And that's the leg day. With just 4 to 6 sets, you're at the very least maintaining your legs. If you do a similar leg day twice a week, you're almost certainly growing muscle at maintenance or in a calorie surplus. And this session only takes about 10 minutes. But I've got good news and bad news. The bad news first. Sure, this leg day does slightly miss a couple of important muscle groups, specifically the rectus femoris, and if you pick the lying leg curl, a couple heads of the hamstrings. But the good news, I'll give you a second super easy leg day you can do in just 10 minutes that will cover those muscle groups. But before I do, a quick word from our sponsor, Creatine Gummies by Tasty Gains. They taste amazing, and you can just throw a pack in your gym bag or your desk drawer. Check out Tasty Gains Creatine Gummies using the link below, and thanks to them for sponsoring this video. In this second leg day, we'll cover the muscle groups we missed in the first one. First, we'll start with a dumbbell Romanian deadlift for 2 sets of 5 to 8 reps with 120 seconds of rest between sets. The dumbbell Romanian deadlift is immensely time efficient. Compared to a barbell variant, which oftentimes requires you to load a barbell, potentially set up a deficit, dumbbells are much faster. They also allow for a bit of extra stretch compared to a barbell unless you set up a deficit, which again would take you extra time and effort. On these Romanian deadlifts, I heavily recommend performing lengthened partials, and that's because of a study by Milo and colleagues. Now, it's worth noting this study is only available currently as a conference abstract, but because this group of researchers has performed plenty of research in the area, I'm willing to consider it as a study. In their study, they compared doing lengthened partials, only the bottom half of a multi-hip hip hinge, to doing a full range of motion reps. This movement is super similar to a Romanian deadlift. The knees are locked in position and it's pure hip extension. And in their study, they found around double the hamstring and glute growth when doing those lengthened partials. Additionally, doing lengthened partials on the dumbbell RDL makes the movement more challenging, which addresses one of the main limitations of the movement. Some people are simply too strong to perform dumbbell Romanian deadlifts with the dumbbells they have available in their gym. However, with partials, I'm willing to bet the weight you use is going to be much lower than you used to. So give these a shot. Some research has shown that Romanian deadlifts and other hip hinges like it target heads of the hamstrings that lying leg curls don't target nearly as well. Next, to target the rectus femoris, we'll move into sissy squats. 2 sets of as many reps as you can. Take around 90 seconds of rest between sets. The first leg day didn't really target the rectus femoris effectively, and here's why. The rectus femoris is a biarticular muscle. It is both a hip flexor and a knee extensor, and as a result, during a squat, leg press, or lunge movement, it is lengthening at one joint and shortening at the other, preventing it from ever really reaching a full stretch or contracting effectively during the movement. However, in a movement like the sissy squat, we're both fully extending the hips to fully stretch the rectus femoris and keeping that hip joint locked, we're allowing the rectus femoris to only shorten and lengthen at the knee joint, both training it in its stretch position, but also allowing it to contract. Just like for the pistol squat, hold on to something with both arms. That'll make the movement a lot more stable. This will make the movement way harder, and I can personally only get about 12 of these. If the sissy squat is too easy and you get more than around 12 reps per set, add some load until you get around 12 or fewer reps per set. The best way to do this is simply to put a plate on your chest. Alternatively, you can also try doing partials to make the sissy squat harder. If the movement is too hard, I would recommend trying reverse Nordic curls with a cable for assistance. Alternatively, if you want an even easier option, which may not be quite as good for hypertrophy on account of having less stretch and less resistance in the stretch, you can try leg extension. And again, for our final optional movement for the workout, the seated leg press calf raise. This time for 2 sets of 8 to 12 reps with 60 seconds of rest between sets. That's it. If you do these 2 10-minute leg days every week, you will very likely build muscle based on the research. For example, the meta-analysis by Pellet and colleagues showed that only 4 fractional weekly sets were required to start making gains. And likewise, a study by our own lab found that trained lifters doing just 1 set per exercise twice a week to failure, or even keeping 2 reps in the tank, led to substantial size and strength gains over only 8 weeks. So building big legs doesn't have to mean doing super high volume training all the time. If all you want is decent, respectable legs, this is a great way to approach it. And in fact, if you want a smarter way to structure your training, whether it's short, simple, minimum effort sessions like this, or more advanced programming, that's exactly what MyoAdapt was built for. You can do workouts for as short as 15 minutes, and as long as 4 hours. MyoAdapt creates fully science-based programs that automatically adjust your volume, intensity, and exercise selection based on how you perform and recover. You log your sessions and the app adapts, just like evidence-based coaching, but right on your phone. Go to MyoAdapt.com and use code WOLF for a free 2-week trial, so you can try it with no commitment. And if you want a more hands-on approach, I do also offer one-to-one coaching, where I personally oversee your training, nutrition, and progression week to week. You can book a call using the link in the description. Spots are limited. Lastly, huge thanks to Rascal Apparel for supporting the channel. I wear their gear in nearly every video. It's comfortable, durable, and looks clean both in and at the gym. If you want to support the channel and upgrade your gym clothing, use code WOLF at checkout via the link in the description for a discount. If you found this video helpful, hit like, subscribe, and comment below how much you hate leg day on a scale from 1 to 10. Or if you're brave enough to try one of these leg days, let me know how they go. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in that next one.